Hey there, and welcome to the Company Road podcast, where we explore the world of entrepreneurship and what it takes to change an organisation. In this episode, we're joined by Mike Dyson, former head of capability and experience design at NBN Australia. With extensive experience across industries like telco, healthcare, finance, and insurance, Mike's an expert in human-centred design, business architecture, and innovation. During his time at NBN, Mike led a cross-functional innovation and design practice, delivering immense value to multiple operational groups. He has transformed lives through simple yet impactful design solutions, and generously shares his leadership experience as a speaker and a mentor. In this episode, we discuss key topics such as the distinction between intrapreneurs and innovators, the essential qualities of successful intrapreneurs, and effective strategies for initiating change. We emphasize the importance of self-assessment and alignment to stay focused and make meaningful contributions. Understanding stakeholders and engaging with them effectively is crucial, as is aligning innovation efforts with business objectives for maximum value. We explore how entrepreneur leaders can create an environment that encourages idea generation, experimentation, and ownership, allowing team members to feel safe expressing themselves and taking risks. Join us on this exciting episode of the Company Road podcast for valuable insights and inspiration as you continue your own entrepreneurial journey. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome, Mike. Welcome to the Company Road podcast. This is actually the first episode that we're going to be recording with you today, and I'm extremely excited to have you on the show. And what a privilege. I met fairly recently. We've been connected for a little while, and would love to just have the chat with you today, get your take on the world of entrepreneurs, the world of companies and organizations that you know so well. Let's hear from you. What's your take on the word entrepreneur? How do you interpret that yourself?
It's an interesting one. I had to really think about it for a bit. There's a difference between entrepreneur and innovator, and I think that's a key distinction for me. An entrepreneur is someone who's an organization who's looking at how to create change in that organization and sell that change, but it's different from an innovator in that they don't necessarily always need to do step change. It can be progressive change. They need to be involved in multiple areas of the organization, and they need to have a good sense of compromise, business acumen, and the likes. And I think that's the key difference to me. Anyone can be really great at being innovative, developing really cool ideas and solutions. But an entrepreneur needs to be someone who actually understands how that's going to support the business in its growth and development. And I think that's an important lens for me.
And tell me about yourself in that context. How do you identify? Do you feel like you're in one camp or the other, in both mostly? How does it work for you?
I actually felt like I was pretty much aligned more to the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Whilst I've definitely done that element of being really out there and innovative, etc., it's really about going, what's the point if it doesn't have or achieve the business goals, objectives, and outcomes we're looking at? And we might determine what those business goals, objectives are through the process. You might work out there's a new market opportunity out there, but it's not just developing it because it's cool. It's got to be something used and useful. Make a step leap in terms of the organization, how it works and how it functions.
And how do you work in that space? What characterizes your approach?
One thing is probably a lot of resilience. Resilience is very high. Secondly, a lot of curiosity. You've got to be really interested in the aspects of the organization, how it works. And a lot of organizations, especially enterprise, are really broad. So the third part you really need in there is really good ability to communicate and network in that organization. Those three things are how you start to be that sort of entrepreneurial mindset. You then back that up with that kind of aspect around understanding metrics and measures, understanding adoption and desirability, and how to be that aspect of going, not everything of yours is going to work and fly. And that's why the resilience is so key, because you're going to have to keep picking yourself back up through that, because you do encounter, both as an innovator or as an entrepreneur, you do encounter a lot of sort of resistance as you go sometimes.
Yeah, let's unpack that a bit. So the resilience, the fact that you're always up against something. How do you handle that? What are some of the tips involved when you're in that situation?
So some good examples, I suppose, of being that entrepreneur, tackling situations where people were really hesitant to change. I think a great example for me was many years ago with NBN Co. We really needed to change the way that our tool sets were perceived by those external partners. So Telstra, Optus, Aussie Broadband, all those organizations, right? We provided that through API services. We also provided a portal service. A lot of the feedback that the staff were providing the organization was the quality of tickets incoming weren't great. And that the real way that we needed to solve this problem was mandating information capture, mandating processes, building more elaborate processes, and really putting the pressure on the external organization that they need to train their staff better. And this resulted in like a 70, 80 page manual, right? And we're looking at this going, for 6, 7 years, you've been trying this process and you're really still complaining about this. So how do we create that moment to not only show a path forward, but bring these people on the journey with us and actually make that step change? And for us, using data and using storytelling together. So we bought up part of the existing tool set that we provided. We had all the experts in the area who've been the ones pushing us all this time to go, everything's perfect, it's fine. And we pointed up this thing and we went, okay, just this one test for a customer service. How long would it take you to learn how to use this test and know exactly what it means? They went, 6 months. And I was like, is that all tests or just this test? And he's like, just this test. And I was like, all access technologies or just this one? He goes, just this one. And then how long would it take you to learn everything? He's like, years. I'm like, do you know that the operators at those service partners only stay on the job 3 to 4 months before they move on? And he just watched this horrified expression on their face. And you're like, do you think they're ever going to be able to send us good quality information and customer outcomes if it takes that long to learn this? And they're like, uh-oh. And I was like, maybe we need to do something different here. And it's really about creating those moments, right? Linking a nice way forward that's really going to achieve business outcomes, but linking that into something that these stakeholders can connect to, understand, and then support you. And overnight, like every person with barrier would suddenly be behind us. And we had all that mission ability to go forward. But up until that point, there are people who've been struggling to hit that mark for years, trying to get that change through. And it took that criticality.
I was just going to say, rewinding back, you were going in with your own approach about the many that had tried to do similar things and had failed as well. Were people warning you against that? Were you thinking, okay, I've got a bit of an idea. I think I might see how it goes. Were you trying something new? I mean, how confident were you going in?
I just always went in with the view of what's the worst they could do to me? Fire me. And you sometimes have to be that bold and brave, right? It doesn't mean be a real arrogant individual about it. It doesn't mean railroad over everyone. It's not a permission to be an absolute maverick asshole, let's be honest. But it is a sense to go, you know what? I already know what the worst outcome can potentially be, and I'm okay with that. If they shoot me down, they shoot me down. But at least I tried.
And your conscious thinking, are you thinking about the worst outcome as you make your moves or you prepare some of these encounters in the organization?
I think it was, but it probably at some point just became second nature. And then it became more of something I'd say to others to help them on their journey. So with my team, for example, they'll be like, oh my God, I'm so stressed out on bringing this up. And I'm like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm not going to fire you. There was that ability to go through that and set that aspect to go, things aren't that bad. You can pitch. I think the challenge that people have with pitching is missing the fundamentals. And those 3 things are making sure it connects to the person you're pitching to, something that is relevant to them, making sure that there's some form of metrics and numbers and measures in there that they can gravitate to, and especially if it's something that links to their performance measures or bonuses, and having an action plan, especially designers, right? I love designers. I am a designer at heart, right? But designers have a hard time wanting to put up recommendations or action plans forward, I find. And that is the missing gap. Is this is the problem, and this is why it's a problem, and we've got evidence that this is a problem, but this is what you should do about it. That is the thing that will make you the difference. That will step you forward.
You mentioned a couple of things there. So one is having an actionable plan, and the other thing is probably knowing your audience. Yeah. Maybe we could just go into a couple of those areas and just tell me about what you do to understand your audience. We talk a lot about it in the world of CX and in the world of design, obviously, but we're often trying to get our lay of the land. We're trying to figure out what the measure of success might look like for that person, but how do you go about it yourself?
Literally trying to find out their KPIs and measures. I learned this from a situation where it went bad. We were having a group of BAs working on a project at Medibank many years ago, and we thought we'd done the right thing by highlighting more customers that were going to be impacted by this issue. So we identified that there was more customers going to be impacted, and thus the challenge was going to be bigger. But at least we now knew the real size of the customers. The product manager lost it in the meeting, big time, absolutely lost it. It was just before Christmas. We've all come back after the small little 2-week break, and this person was now the most friendliest person you've ever seen. And everyone was going to me going, what the hell happened over Christmas? Did they just get like the most brilliant holiday? Did they win lotto? Like, why are they so chirpy now? And I'm like, because they missed their bonus cycle. And everyone's just looked at me like, what do you mean? I went, well, Medibank got measured at end of calendar year and end of financial year. So we just told them in that meeting that they're going to miss their bonus cycle. Now we've got 6 months to prove it. And once we work those stuff out, it changed the way we pitch messages. It changed the way we can connect to it. And we are driven a lot of time either by mission or money, right? And so having that view of trying to work out what they're measured on, when the cycle is, it can really help you with working out your stakeholders. And it confuses me with designers where we have, like you said, in CX, we have all these great tools on mapping customers, but our stakeholders are our customers as well. So we're going to apply those same tools and techniques exactly how we would do it to an actual customer of the company, to our customers, to understand them and work out who's good partners, who's good stakeholders, what's those drivers, wants, needs, behaviors. And that then empowers you to be able to talk to them and make those sort of really meaningful and connected conversations.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? It's one thing to just let the organization or the work or the project take you with it. You're often feeling less empowered, less in control. You're often trying to make a mark yourself, and you've got your own objectives, you've got your own training, you've got your own personal development plan, all the things that you're bringing to the table are there in your mind, but somehow it doesn't always fit with the situation that you're in. Do you find that?
Yeah, it does. And it's really interesting. You can really work really heavily on stuff and do really good work, but still have a bad annual review. Like, I've learned that lesson, right? Which is you've lost sight. You've listened to a lot of loud voices through the journey, but you've lost sight of what you're actually there to do and achieve. And when you see that stuff diverting, you really got to take either a step back to go, should I pull back from this and make sure I refocus? Or do I need to have a retargeting conversation, which is, no, this is actually what our new focus is, and I need to formalize. And it's making sure you do those self-assessments. It can be every quarter type stuff I find really works, or sometimes monthly. It depends on how fluid and fast your workplace is. But make sure you block in that time for yourself to do that self-assessment, to go, how aligned am I with everything? Am I actually achieving all those goals and development? Do I need to pivot, reset? What things do I need to start? Or I'm trying to remember the right one. Ryan Rumsey has a good one he just taught me recently, where it was like basically raise, reduce, eliminate, or start, right? I love that, because NBN, we used to use start, stop, continue all the time. But there would be so much stuff and continue, you'd be overwhelmed with the amount of work. By having raise and reduce, you give me more focus on, still got to work on it, but my quadrant of the things I should be spending all my effort on is this one. I still got to work on this, but I shouldn't be spending as much time on this.
Yeah, definitely a point around self-awareness, checking in with yourself and your goals. But I think an organization can be a lonely place too. It feels like you have to find those points of connection with the wider organization, even if you're getting just some peer-to-peer advice from a colleague or somebody from another team. Yep. Do you do anything like that just to check in? Because I think that you can get lost in your own thought process sometimes. You go into overthink quite quickly. What's your view on that?
It's definitely a thing you have to do. And it comes down to how formalized that style needs to be as well. So you can go into that full process of full 360 reviews, and I would maybe do those maybe once, twice a year, but you do your regular check-ins and elements. The way I used to look at it, especially as a leader, but even my seniors and leads, I would say the same, is your week is broken up into 5 days. 3 days is the days you're doing work, the actual project time you're doing. You're going to lose a day due to admin in any large corporate. Like, just between meetings, team check-ins, other team rituals, timesheets, you're going to lose a day. That last day is your business development and networking day, and that's really important. So that helps you set up with keeping connected, even with people you're not working projects on, just so you have an insight of what's coming up. Gives you an opportunity to check in on perception and feedback and all those things. But that's the day when you go and have a rolling calendar of who you're going to meet on that day, have coffee with, be it virtual or not, and keep those connections going.
Yeah, as you're doing the coffees and stuff, it's a big thing over here in Melbourne. It's not done everywhere, but how do you get the most out of those encounters, those meetings? Or are they just rolling invites? Are you planning for them at all? What are you doing there?
I do keep a calendar of people and priority and areas, and then we'll flex the weighting of how often I need to connect with them based upon it. So there is a lot of setup admin life for yourself to get in there, but once you've got to go in it becomes second nature. And so people who you got active projects on, especially on where they are in the life cycle of the project, yeah, you're going to have regular catch-ins just on that one. The ones you know have got the leading next piece of work, they're going to be in the next batch. And so you got those tiers through that process. And then most of those individuals, I might have been only meeting a good chunk of them once a month, if that. But by having those regular setups, by having those regular ritual points, everyone else got really used to them. And we got into a really good style with them. Having a floating agenda element helps you with what the purpose is and everything, because it just settles what the importance is for that other individual. But I found a lot of time that once you started get going, half the conversation would go somewhere else, and in a good way. It would start to untap into things and insights and information that you were off that agenda, because they now had an element of trust with you, they had an element of relationship, and they would come to you and bring up stuff going, you know what, I'm really thinking about this, but in 9 months, but can we meet more regularly to do this? And I'm like, sure, of course we can.
Yeah, it's almost like a muscle memory, isn't it? You get into the habit of it, and then one conversation leads to the other. It prompts your brain and your thought process. It makes you think and draw connections with things that you wouldn't otherwise see if you're trying to figure it out on your own at your desk, or you were just in more of a group meeting type situation. And most of the catch-ups one-to-one.
Because the element I find is we have different personas, right, in work. And the persona I have in a meeting room versus the persona I have as a one-on-one can be very different personas. And so you need to understand how far gap that is on some individuals. I have an amazing friend of mine. She's awesome. But every time we're in a group meeting, I'll kill me now, because she just come out. Like, we'd have all these great one-on-one conversations. She'd be like, I'm so supportive of your work. This stuff is amazing. It's so great. If she ever hears this, she's going to kill me, because she'll know it's about her. And then in a group meeting, we'll absolutely tear us a new one. And we're just like, why didn't you bring this up 3 days ago? It was just part of their nature. It was in that moment. They had put on a different hat. They didn't even realize what they were doing. They were there to represent and fix those sort of things. And so you got to be cognizant of that. Know that it's easier to get that more personalized feedback and off-the-wall discussion in those one-on-one sessions than it is in times where you've got those group sessions. They're a little bit more caged.
Yeah, tell me about the hats that you wear, if it's the personas or the hats, or whichever analogy you feel like you want to use. But the many sides of Mike, what are they?
At one point, my visual designer changed my team's avatar to have a Fire Chief's hat on. Look, there are a few different ones. There's definitely what I'd call the active listener, no action. And that's more of a leadership one-on-one, especially with your people, because a lot of the time they're amazing. They know what they need to do. They just need you as a sounding board. And like any good relationship, there's times where they don't want you to solve anything. They just want you to listen. So there's definitely that hat. There's the hat of the states or diplomatic individual. So especially a lot of the time, you're connected with way more teams than anyone else. You have more context and empathy for way more of the organization and departments than anyone else does. And so a lot of the time, you got to play this mediator role inside these meetings, etc., because you can see broader than they can. You can see that aspect. There is definitely sometimes as I said, the fire chiefs, there is times where you always find where stuff's just gone wrong, stuff's on fire, everyone's on deck. It's how do you not panic in those situations? The ultimate thing you need to be as a firefighter is someone who has the visual look of someone who's not panicking and is in control. Sure, internally you can be panicking the shit. Like you've got to have that perception and show that leadership that you're going to be there whilst everything's going wrong and it's okay. I'd say there's dozens of others.
But what about the times when you feel like you need people to know that you're quite concerned or you're a little bit stressed? How do you present in that situation?
I'd probably say with myself personally, a lot of people have commented that I generally am I'm a lot more empathetic, emotionally visible than a lot of people. So I can, at times, will display that in the right setting. I'd have to be around people who I feel like I can be like that at times. And then they'll know that there's stuff stressed. And I think it comes out with just, you don't mean to, but you tend to be a little bit more shorter with conversations and shorter with directions and not detailed on observations. And I feel like especially my team really picked up when they knew stuff was going on, because I'll be like, okay, guys, I just need to can you guys get something like this done? And like, ooh, something's gone wrong.
So they know it. They know, if they know you, they know that when it
Yeah.
happens, they can read the signs.
I think there's another side of me, which is probably my more personal side, which is, and something that a lot of people don't know, I actually have permanent muscle and nerve damage. When I was 14, I had an angle grinder come at my head and cut me to the bone on my arm with a lot of stitches. It was not fun. And that's led to permanent ongoing pain, right? It's on a daily level. It just depends on the day, on how good or bad it is.
Oh,
But
wow.
what that always taught me was to always I always have this real stubborn streak not to let it affect me. People that are really close to me always know the days that I'm struggling, but I think that aspect of always managing that has taught me to really handle resilience and stress in situations probably very differently to a lot of others, because I got to work with it. I've always got to sit there and deal with something.
Yeah, well, that's incredibly self-aware, obviously, when you're going through that and you need to prepare and get yourself ready for any of those situations. It must be really hard. But did you just have to learn that, or work with people to help you with it as well?
No, I think I'm just very stubborn. I just have to learn it.
Yeah.
And it takes into my nature. Anyone who ever sees me reach for a painkiller is just, oh, he's having a real bad day, because I will put off any painkiller you could imagine. And
Yeah.
like, just the basic Panadol, I'm like, nah, not doing it. Yeah, I think it's just a stubborn need to be in control of myself at all times.
Yeah.
It's not in control of the situation around you, because that's impossible and stupid, but it's this thing where I can control myself. I will do that.
Do you have any rituals along those lines that kind of get you in the zone or help you prepare?
There's definitely a few songs that I will queue up and listen to. I'm very audio driven in terms of that way.
Yeah.
My go-to, and this is such a geek one, my go-to for the last few months has been Dare by Stan Bush. Yeah. So awesome 80s power ballad. The Transformers animated movie was used in lots of like montages, but it's a great don't matter what the darkness is, just keep daring to live your dream, and then just keep going for it type stuff. And things like music will always get me there. And those moments where everything's going wrong and I got to sit down, I got to push out material or a pack or anything, I'll just find my right playlist, chuck it up, and I'm in the zone.
Oh, that's a quick fix. But yeah, I might have to check out your playlist at some point. This sounds awesome. There's some good ones on there. He's done a few like that, hasn't he? Stan Bush.
Oh, his stuff's all very similar, yes. But classic 80s rock power ballad, that's for sure.
Fantastic. Let's talk a bit about the organizations that you've been in a little bit more, if we can, in and around when you're in there. And we've talked a bit about yourself and your own approaches, and got to know you a little bit better, Mike, which has been great. But I want to hear a bit more about the organizations that you've been trying to move along a certain trajectory, evolve, a change in some way. What are some of the signs of an organization needing to change? And when do you know that something needs to be done?
Trust. Trust is actually the biggest indicator to me of an organization and its health and its need to change. So there's been a lot of organizations, especially because, a lot of the time I'm focused on service improvements, right? How do we best deliver the services we need to customers, to partners, to wholesalers, B2B, all the rest of it. And when you walk into these organizations and the first thing they like to do is tell you that all faults are someone else's, it instantly rings alarm bells to me that there is a lot of underlying issues here. There's stuff to be broken down that needs to change. There are obviously real world scenarios where people are doing the wrong thing. But when you blanket wave that, it just shows that you as an individual actually feel out of control with your job. You don't realize it really yet. You don't realize just how much you're actually unhappy with stuff. But that nature of finger pointing at everyone is really such a massive symptom of it. And it's not the cause, but it's just definitely the effect. I think that's definitely there. The other aspect that I see quite regularly is, or at least a quote actually my dad gave me, which was, people don't mind change, but they hate being changed. And so looking at how people handle adjustments in their workplace also gives you an insight in terms of how comfortable they are with the workplace, how supported they are. The third thing I always look for is two particular tools: Post-it notes or Excel. If I find those in any service offering, it means the process is damn broken. And you've got really elaborate workarounds. We were doing work at Medibank. One of the weird things I've seen to have done in my career quite a lot is doing what they call single pane of glasses, like really creating a new system of interaction that sits over multiple systems and really simplifies the process. They're basket cases of projects to work on, but they're brilliant. I love them when they work well. We went into Medibank and just watching the retail staff try to support customers in a store, and they're writing 20 post-it notes per customer and sticking it on the monitor as they're trying to work out health insurance, which is complex at the best of times. Just sat there and I just went, this stuff's not working, right? And it was an interesting project for us because we created this new simplified quoting tool that they could use. And we had so many defects and bugs. We're up to bug 200. All the leadership were angry at us. And we were using the test version in the training course for the retail staff. And we didn't know what to do in one particular situation. We brought in one of the people from the training course, and she just went, oh, you guys are all amazing. This is the best thing. This is going to make my life. And you just watch this whole room just go, oh, God. She goes, I won't even need to use Post-it notes. I'm like, oh, thank Christ. And it was that realization like that changed everyone's view of what we're delivering. But those things just show you where you're having to use that, when you're having to write notes in a notepad that sits somewhere else. You're just going to have so many quality problems. You're going to have so many customer experience challenges. It throws people off their game on how to communicate because they're really focused on the tools to get around the system than they are really on delivering the customer experience or service that they're looking for.
It raises an interesting point, doesn't it? Because that can obviously present an opportunity to change something. If you see that's a process and it's a workaround that people are using, they're happy with it, it reveals a lot to you. If you're a strategist or if you're looking to change the operation, and actually it can be a bit of an insight in itself. You see how it's running, you realize that you can almost evolve it in some way because you focus on that thing and then make it into a better version of itself, essentially.
Definitely. And sometimes it leads to the most smallest change in the system that makes the biggest impact. We could spend millions doing this and this, but actually if all we did was just do this one thing, then we'll actually save the company millions. And you can see those changes. Like I've seen ones where we've had it where we turned something around in less than a week and saved the organization millions of dollars, improved quality, all the rest of it. And it was just from observing one of those stupid little moments. And it would never have gotten up because it was never on a business case on its own. No one ever thought it was a problem without just seeing that sort of workaround in practice.
So what's at the heart of that? Find those little gems in the mix of things.
Observation is one of the big key ones. And that can come across from two ways. It can come across from just your standard, just don't ask for permission, getting out there, watching people, or just being a curious mindset. Sometimes it also can be done via exposure of the existing tools and practices to a new audience. I've got a classic example of that.
Go on.
We launched testing tools for the field technicians in NBN so they could run their own tests on the mobile app. And so we launched the first version of it and it fell over 4 times out of 10, like completely broke. And every exec was on us going, what the hell's going on? What did you guys do? You broke it. We're like, we just showed the same stuff that the people inside the center are doing. We didn't change the actual test. What the hell's going on? Everyone's panicking. And I'm just like, can you guys give me like 10 minutes? And they're like, sure, okay. So I went around the corner to where the actual contact center agents were. And I watched them work. And I'm like, hey, how's this system working today? Like, normal. How's this test working today? Normal. How often does that thing fall over? Oh, 4 times out of 10. Oh, yeah. How long's that been happening? As long as I've been here. How long have I been here? 3 years. What do you do when that happens? I email that guy and he fixes it. I go back and I'm like, it's BAU. Everyone's losing their mind going, how is this BAU? Because they had a process. They had a workaround. They knew how to work. It wasn't a pain point to those individuals. And that's where the power of observation, either by exposing to a new audience or actually watching it in play yourself, and you go, what are they doing? This is insane. Because it's not a pain to the operator. They know what to do. They're not uncomfortable with that situation.
We work in the field of design and experience design, and it's pretty normal for us to go and observe and to listen and to watch and research. What tools or advice would you give to people that are maybe not trained in that area, or how would they go about uncovering some of these things?
Oh, that's a good one. There's 2 aspects to that. Designers, and I'm going to say something quite controversial probably through this, which is Organizations don't need designers to be successful. They can be successful without design. What designers bring to the table is a actual approach and a scientific method to actually working out why this is going to work, or why it's a good investment, or what actually out of it is going to be the thing that actually matters most. So when we talk about then, can others who are non-designers go do the observations, all the rest of it, that sort of stuff exists. Lean Six Sigma with Toyota, with their famous, with their Gembas, all the rest of it, that's all about that power observation and just note-taking. Where people stumble, I always see, is by not stepping back and testing data to validate how often it occurs. Because observation can be very hit and miss. You can go through days without seeing a cool problem to solve, or you can see one problem and get fixated on it, and without then making sure. So just taking the notes, making sure you write enough details, get the ticket number, whatever it was working on. Anyone can do that. Challenge yourself to then go, but how often does this occur? And that, I think, is what designers just do naturally, because they want to know the impact and the size, level of improvement this will bring to the organization. That's what others need to think about and add to it, because that will help your business case anyway. If you sit there and go, oh man, they do this for 6 minutes, 200 times a day in this whole team, that's my business case right there.
So it's not so much a methodology as such, or is it more of a mindset?
It's more of
an attitude?
It's a mindset and attitude, yeah. Yeah, tools change, techniques change, and they should. We evolve and learn new ways of doing things. We learn new ways of communication. We learn. Organizations will go on their journey on that. Take how might we statements. I've stopped using those a long time ago, right? But they're such a crux for a lot of designers. They're about trying to focus people and individuals around the business problem and the outcome. I'd rather focus as I go in there now going, what's the evidence, what's the value, and what's the opinions? And then I determine what the project we need to do based on that, which is something I stole from Harriet Wakeman from IAG, but I was just fell in love when I learned that technique off her and use it now. And I think that's the key. We've got to evolve, right? And the people around us, the business people we're working with, the customers we're working with, they're all evolving too. So don't fall in love with the tool, fall in love with the curious mindset that tool's exposing for you.
Yeah, really interesting point around evolution within the organization, and proficiency is coming up. People are bringing that capability in-house. There's a lot of effort going on in that space within transformation more generally. CX isn't something that's owned by one team anymore. Everyone needs to be across it. People need to know who their customers are, end users, personas, all of that. Feels like it's a generic language that everyone's talking now. And some people admittedly have got different understandings of those terms and phrases. But what's your view on all of that? It's almost becoming democratized.
Which is good. I think the challenge that we see, though, is that people, yet again, focus on the tools. And so it's, I need personas or blueprints or something. And I'm like, why? What is the point or purpose of this? Is it for communication? Is it for realization? Is it for prioritization? Is it for this or that? And I think the good thing about the aspect that people become more aware of this is it makes it an easier conversation, especially for strategy and design, and anyone who's trying to be this more customer-centric, human-centeredness, to articulate why they're trying to be there and what they're trying to do and align to purpose. But if you focus too much on the tools and methodology and about trying to make these gatekeeper processes, you're going to lose the point of what you were there to do and probably add too much time in. Design usually gets a lot of bad stick on saying it takes too long to get it. And especially because it is a hockey stick. You see this thing where it's like not a lot of value because there's all this, so much scientific research and hypothesizing and work going on. And then suddenly, bang. And then you're like, where the hell did that come from? But oh my God, that's amazing. Creating really rigid gateway systems are not going to help you with that flexibility to move and change within there based upon the program of work you're working on. And so I think it's how do you get that balance? How do you understand the need? And how do you get the stakeholders on that journey to know when they should be asking for something or not, or understanding why you're saying that you need to add that in the project? And the biggest complaint I hear from a lot of designers a lot of time is they don't engage us early enough. I don't have time to do all this stuff now. And a lot of time I got to challenge that and go, are you doing the right stuff? Or do you think you need to do that stuff? Or is it vice versa? How do we educate and bring people on the journey to go, yeah, we do need at least this time to do this?
But is that because the ask that's coming down from the seniors, from the stakeholders, from the board, it's framed a certain way? You're past the past the package in a way. It's a problem to solve, or even it's prescribed as something that you have to go and do. How do you respond? You're an intrapreneur thinking about that mindset that you've described. How do you respond in those situations?
I think I'll go back to the evidence and value opinion, to be honest, because when you run that as a session, it's really about going, okay, I understand goals and achievements. Like, how does this project look good? What is the value to the organization? And capturing those points allows you to anchor on what good looks like at the end of it. Then anchor it on why do you think this is, where's the need in the market, all the rest of it, and asking the question, do we have that understanding of where does this come from? And that difference between evidence and opinion really drives to me what I need to do. If everything has already got research, if it's already got a McKinsey report, if it's already got this and it's all in evidence and value, then it's all about how do I best deliver this solution and the art of compromise. If I got a lot of opinion and then the senior leaders with me are like, actually, you're right, we don't actually really know this, then it helps the conversation to start going, actually, we need to spend some time validating this. It's a validation exercise of these opinions.
Coming back to the point, though, around the democratization, if the majority of the organization isn't as, I guess, independent in their thought process as you've just described and taking the order and running with it, how do you get around that when presumably the majority are just going with the flow and they're trying to get things through because that's what they've been told to do and that feels like the right thing?
Pick your battles. You can't be anywhere, everywhere. You're never going to have a big enough team to do it. And that was exactly my life at NBN, right? You've got hundreds of millions of dollars of development work going on at all times. You've got people who are making judgment calls, and they have to make judgment calls, right? Pick the areas where you think that you can play best and deliver the best value and help steer in those locations. And be comfortable with being uncomfortable that there are going to be areas which might work, might not work. They could actually accidentally deliver something amazing by accident, but know where you need to support, because you can't, it's a path to madness trying to fight that machine because it's just too much going on. And so the only other options that come out of that then is you show with your style that you're more effective more often. You've got more consistency in how effective you and what your deliverables are because of the way you approach it, which then gets people curious and want to come on board. And the only other options that come with that then is either I manage my pipeline of work to suit the level of resources I have, or they sponsor me to start to grow and I can increase the level of influence and change I have. But I've always got to have in the back of the mind going, I can't control everything. There's always going to be something going on around me.
And has that changed for you? I'm sure the answer is yes. Maybe think about how has that changed for you over the course of your career or in recent years? Have you taken a different outlook? Have you experimented with a few different things? What's been your journey in that respect?
Yeah, definitely. Because I worked out a while back going that there's 6 areas of focus. You can only pick one major and 2 minors, almost like a uni degree, right? And those areas are, you can be the explorer. You can be out there completely always looking for the brand new market, the great unknown. But you know what? Your risk there is you're going to be seen as someone who's not really delivering anything, or the path of value realization so far out because it takes years for those strategies to come in place. You can be the shaper who's there to take at least a point in direction, a North Star, a guidance, one of those ideas you were talking about earlier, but shape it and change it and make sure that it's fit for purpose. You're still in that strategy space, but you're more targeted in what you're going after, and you've got a little bit more where you've got the aspect you've been asked to be there. You can then go into the space where, and I've tried to do this as well, which was worked for a little bit, but then became the path to madness. And I've seen design practices, for example, go get cold Dr. No through this process, which is you can be the advisor influencer, right? So you're that person sitting there in just the project meetings going, yeah, but have you thought about the customer? We've all seen them, right? They're there for a good reason to begin with, which is to bring in that customer centricity. But if all they're doing is trying to be that little angel on the shoulder without anything behind it, people get frustrated with them and go around them. You can be that super SME that people just tap in to engage on certain things, which help a little bit of shaping. And then the last two models are like embed yourself in major transformation projects, but at the end of it, you're pretty much culled. And then lastly, ongoing agile teams, right? Which are production houses. You're not going to shape the strategy in that area. You're going to do good, consistent work. You're going to make sure everything is incremental improvements, but you're not going to drive it because you're delivering the aspect. And so you got to work out, you're really sitting more up this side and which one are you playing the most? We produced massive, elaborate service blueprints and capability blueprints from a business architecture lens. And we use those two to basically go, here's the service experience, here's all the pain points, here's the shared capabilities, and here's the shared capability gaps. If we invest in this one capability, which is used in this many service journeys, we'll get more bang for our buck. And we'll try to do that process. But at the same time, people were just like, yeah, but that doesn't support my project, or it doesn't support me, or it doesn't show you how I'm doing. And you just found that people were like, that's nice, and then just navigating around it. And that's why I had to constantly learn how to change and pivot with the organization and where it was at in terms of the focus, and try to bring in that scope. Because if you're just trying to be everything, you need a team of 100. You become unfocused. People don't know what your value is there. They don't know what you're there to do and achieve. They can't explain you. And if others can't explain you, you're at massive risk. And so you really got to focus in. And I think what I learned, I used to get really uncomfortable with the fact that there's all this work happening without my buy-in. My team would go nuts going, oh my God, why aren't we working on this project and this project? We should be working on this. And I had to get comfortable with the fact that I wasn't there. And that was the only way I could keep my health going. And the fact that this is not all fallen out definitely led to a lot of gray, but like, you go insane, especially large corporate. You're an entrepreneur. Look at some of these things. You've got to be targeted in what you do.
What about thinking about a new role and joining a new organization, and you've been through the process of meeting a few people, through the recruitment process, you've done a few interviews, you may have done a presentation, you think you're into the right space and you've got high hopes for it. In your first few weeks, months, how do you go about getting to know a place? And I guess, first of all, understanding the challenges that you're up against, but also the dynamics of the place that you think you need to work with.
I'd be building strategy maps, stakeholder canvases, and building out another one from Ryan Rumsey, actually, which is the good partner model. Building out that strategy map, understanding the hierarchy of the strategies. What is the strategy of the company? Is it growth? Is it service differential? Is it cost reduction? Is it this? Is it that? Is a good understanding to know what's going to matter. Then working out, where do I sit in this organization? How's my work linked to this? What does that mean? And then drawing that web around it that goes, well, who else is also linked to delivering those outcomes? And then how do I build the relationships with them so that we're seen as one team? And it is quite a bit of Miro, Figma, Canvas work, whatever tool you want to do with building it out. But I'm literally on the journey about to start in a new organization next month, which I won't talk about yet. That is literally my plan at the moment. I'm building out my plan right now going, right, when I start this, I've got to build these out. And I've got to work that out to go, what is it I'm there to achieve? What am I going to be measured on? What's the company measured on? How does my approach link to it? And then work out really, of course they want me, but why did they feel that there was a problem or space to be filled that needed me to be there for it?
Some people will hire with a mold or a certain type of person in mind. Sometimes they take more of a punt, more of a risk. Where an entrepreneur coming in and we know they can do some good stuff. We're not sure yet, but we'll try them out. You know,
I feel like every time anyone's ever hired me, it's definitely on the second one. It's always gone. He seems cool.
But you're being hired for that, right?
Yes.
They want you to align with the company objectives. They think that you can contribute to that meaningfully, obviously. But it's also around knowing when to push the boundaries and knowing when to work with some of those constraints and get around them.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you do in that space?
It depends, because it comes down to everywhere has constraints, right? It's going to come down to resources, funds, regulation, all the rest of it. You've got to understand what some of those constraints are and what you can work with it. Regulation, legal, it's out of your control, right? So you got to park that, know that, and do that. Things like funds, resources are controllable aspects when presented in the right fashion. And so learning those constraints, learning what the drivers are, what the measures of success potentially are for those, help me understand what I can do about them. And then it's about creating almost back to being the same way I'd pitch a solution is going to be the same way I pitch those moves in the organization to change that. And we've done that with things like even completely rethinking job descriptions, our KPIs, OKRs, you name it, right? Like I've actually gone through partway through a annual performance measurement and actually convinced them to change the measures they were actually in the middle of assessing me against, because we highlighted that the constraints were different and this was different and what we were actually getting asked to do was different. And I actually went to them going, what do you want me to be out of these two things? Do you want me to be measuring successful in this or measuring successful in that? And we changed that right through that process. But you always need the structure and the consequence. You always need the aspect of the what, so what, and what next in it, or what the situation, context, and response is. And that storytelling helps you with dealing with that.
This is a slight tangent, but how do you bring that mindset through your teams? How do you make them feel comfortable with some of this as well? If you're leading a team, they know what you're trying to do individually, but they also want to help out in some way. How do you foster that culture of innovation there?
It's creating that psychological safety and being able to test, trial, and be fearless within the team. So creating the right purpose of your rituals as a team, creating the right spots where you have innovation concepts or ideas, or where people can bring up and test stuff, where they can self-volunteer each other to help out and devote some of their time to each other on it as well, are all really good things, especially when you're trying to run that entrepreneur group. Being yourself open as well for time and setting up time where people can come in and just test ideas on you. I think there was a corner of the building that there was not a single whiteboard that I didn't take ownership of with my team, because they come up to me and they'll be like, oh, so I'm thinking of this. And I'd be like, awesome. And they're like, oh shit, he's getting up from his desk. And then I'll get out the whiteboard marker and would test and play out that idea and tease it out. So those things were all important, and being able to be there for that and support them on it. The thing I had to learn in my leadership journey through that, because I didn't really get trained in being a leader, and I'd still say there's many areas I need to develop. One of the things I needed to do was make sure that I didn't take their concepts and run with it. And so what I needed to always do was open the doors for them to connect to the right people and talk about it and support them, step the hell out so they can present it, and then at the end of it, help wrap that up in the actions and the conversation. And by giving that meant that I gave them a lot of trust in what they were pitching. I was showing my support because I was letting them do it. And then I was making sure they had the right friendly audiences to work with it. And that's really important as a leader to do that. I was going into those sessions originally and was going, oh my God, this person's done this amazing thing and this is all it is. And basically spoke for them, which really devalued what they did. Oh my God, looking back now, I'm just like, what a tool, mate. And I'm so glad they pulled me up. They felt psychologically safe to tell me off, which was amazing. And so did my GM. And that helped make that change. And once you make that change, your team feel like they can actually come to you with ideas and concepts. And I tell you what now, like there are certain ideas and concepts that my team came up with that I now use on a constant basis. And I tell them that I use it all the time. But ways of thinking of using like Knutham framework, for example, to measure how successful the service should be and the level of effort in it. Like that was ideas from people on my team, and promoting those and taking those and giving that sense of accomplishment with it. That's how you create the right culture to have that teamwork. Because like I said earlier, you can't be there everywhere. And as a leader, you're just working with the stakeholders to create the space. You need those other people there to actually deliver the outcomes.
And how do you let them know that safety is there without just making an announcement one day about what you say or how you act? How would you establish some of that feeling of safety?
It's definitely about some aspects of being vulnerable, demonstrating yourself, I think some of the aspects I need to do was throw out some, I knew, triggering controversial statements for one or two people to jump in where I just knew it was going to trigger them, but it created the aspect for the rest of the group when I was like, oh yeah, I get that, to create then a dialogue. And then later on, one of them turned to me and went, you deliberately baited me, didn't you? And I went, yeah, I totally did. Because I wanted everyone else to feel comfortable watching that exchange and going, nothing happened through that. It takes time to build psychological safety. It's not something you can just walk into a meeting and go, we're now psychologically safe. It's a continual set of behaviors. It's a continual set of authenticity and presence. And it took me a while to learn what presence actually meant, especially in the society we are now. Like the amount of times I'd pick up my phone before or my watch and look at messages and team calls and all the rest of it. I was devaluing what I was doing. I was devaluing the meeting. I was devaluing the level of attention. You've got to make sure when you're in that session 100%. And that then creates that environment for you. I always say that the purpose of executives, and I've always said this to my team, and I said when I go pitch to the C-levels and all the rest of it, when I go pitch to a C-level or an exec, it's not about getting their endorsement. Sorry, it's not about getting them to go, yes. It's a default yes. It's for them to challenge me or to teach me something I don't know. That is what my mental mode is in going there. And I said, that's the mental mode you need to go in there. If you've put something together, you know it's the right thing to do. But the only difference might be you just might not know something out there. And that's happened to me. Like I learned that one pitching to some of our EGM executives, and I went there and they went, fantastic idea. However, Mike, what you don't know is this is about to happen. And I just sat there and went, shit, if that happens, we can't do that anymore. Give me a week. I'll come back to you with a revised plan. And not coming up with something right there at that second or discounting what they said to me was really important and built trust. And half the time they were just like, what do you recommend? I'm this. Okay. They wouldn't even challenge unless they'd heard something that it needed it specific. But it was that mental mode to go, they are there to tell me stuff I don't know. That is what their purpose is. Otherwise, it's a default yes. And you look at things like the Amazon 6-page brief and all the rest of those groups that try to build those entrepreneur strategies. If you pitch it, it's a default yes. The people who want to say no have to convince everyone else because you've already put the diligence in by building out those briefs, by answering those questions, by knowing those challenges. So it's quite crazy.
That's it. Crazy is the word. Let's take a step back. We've had the fortune of hearing from you for the last little while and lots of anecdotes, lots of approaches, stories, things that would just help out in that situation. It just feels like we've covered a lot of ground here. But just taking a step back, with all of those things that you've tried and you've evolved your approach a little bit over the years, how would you summarize the impact, using some of those tricks and techniques that you've been describing through your entrepreneurial efforts?
I think probably one of the proudest ones, we're implementing a digital solution with physical trucks. It was not with NBN, it was something else. I'm trying to keep some of the details disclosed. It was using live GPS tracking and live force monitoring. And as a result of this, it actually saved someone's life. So they actually ended up in an accident in the rural area. They were out of mobile coverage. They're out of everywhere. And from the digital device, which mind you, we had the unions on our butt for, it actually informed us that an incident happened and we actually could get paramedics out there and this person was unconscious lying on the road. And I think there is not a moment where you sit there and you can go, where you've done change, there's actually created the ability for humans to be safer and alive. Nothing will ever beat that. You can talk about the hundreds of millions of dollars of benefits, but when you sit there and go, what's the value on life? It's not measurable. And that was such a career moment in a very scary way. The funny thing is, the next week, the unions were like complaining to me about why didn't all the other vehicles have this device? And I was like, come on, you were complaining to me last week that we had it. But that really taught me the value of what's in it for me.
Wow, what a story. I mean, that is big, isn't it? When you know that you've made that difference. It's incredible, really. And it makes all those meetings, all those presentations, all the things that you've described somewhat worthwhile, doesn't it? When you feel like you make an impact like that.
I think that the lesson I want to add on to that in terms of impact and value, and I think the impact and value that entrepreneurs, innovators, etc., need to understand, because this is where designers, where I think they stumble, is where things don't go ahead. So part of my team, or part of what I used to try to keep internally for my team at NBN, was this balanced scorecard of value delivered. And value delivered to me was direct value from cost savings. It was perceived estimated value from cost avoidance. And so a good example of that is with our jigsaw program that we had there, we didn't need to hire 2,000 more operators, take all the cost of the salaries, the office space, the licenses, all the rest of it. That was cost the company avoided, right? Cost moved, or at least reinvestment opportunity, is one that people miss. A lot of the value that we drove, especially by being experimental, is spending $10K and realizing that an idea is no good. But in the traditional world, it would have gone ahead and they would have spent 4 million before they worked that out. And so people who work in this space will get down going, oh, we spent all this time, we didn't get the value out of it. No, you saved the company $4 million that could be reinvested somewhere else. So celebrate that. Take those aspects. Every time you work on something and it's not proceeding, go ask someone, how much would it have costed us to deliver this? And that is the cost that you avoid the organization. Because what's the point of building it, delivering it if no one's going to use it? It's wasted money and it can be reinvested somewhere else. And I think a lot of the time when I've talked about the great things we've delivered, a lot of it was actually that. It was like, here is how we've used this mindset to de-risk your organization, to ensure you're investing in the right things. And we saved this money, which you reinvested into these platforms.
Yeah, I suppose it comes down to the story and how you present it.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Because the hockey stick can be just the hockey stick, or it can lead to other things. You can obviously join one process or one set of discussions to another, really evolve that story or use it to line up the next rounds of work. It doesn't have to stop when people think it's all over at the end. You're having your end of project drinks. Everyone's just thinking it's done and dusted, but actually there might be something that you can leverage from that to take forward.
Yes, exactly. There's always new learning. There's always new things. And it's having, I think, as I said earlier, that resilience and that curious mindset is what keeps you going in this. Yes, there's going to be moments where you're just like, oh my God, what did we do? But you got to pick yourself back up and know that everything you're doing is actually always of value.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much. Absolute pleasure having you on the show. I can't tell anyone, obviously, what you're going to be doing next, but they're going to be very lucky to have you. Maybe you can just tell people how they might be able to find you if they want to get in touch and ask you a question or anything like that. Maybe there'll be some connections out there that want to say hello.
Yeah. Generally, LinkedIn is obviously the best place for me. For people who are looking in more of a mentor aspect, I'm also on ADP list. So you can always even book official times if you want to do that aspect. But definitely reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn. As it's obvious, I love to chat. I love to share. I love to storytell. I don't think anyone who's been watching, listening to this would tell. But yeah, been an absolute pleasure, Chris. I was so looking forward to this all week.
Brilliant.
We've had a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun.
For sure, yeah. Thanks so much, Mike. I'll stop there, but thanks again.
Thanks. Have a good one, all.
Okay, so that's it for this episode. If you're hearing this message, you've listened all the way to the end, so thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please leave us a review and share this episode with your friends, team members, leaders, if you think it'll make a difference. After all, we're trying to help you, the entrepreneurs, kick more goals within your organizations. If you have any questions about the things we covered in the show, please email me directly at chris@companyroad.co. I answer all messages, so please don't hesitate to reach out. And to hear about the latest episodes and updates, please head to companyroad.co to subscribe. Tune in next Wednesday for another new episode.